And welcome to hello and welcome to this afternoon's session with four former chairmen of the FCC. I've had the great privilege of knowing all of these gentlemen over the years, worked with some of them, worked against some of them, just kidding. And anyway, we have an amazing group here. Let me just introduce our panelists really quickly. And I'll do it by the order in which they were chairman of the FCC. Way back when, Dennis Patrick was chairman of the FCC back in 1987 through 89, if my memory serves me correctly. And he was chairman at the time where 911 celebrated its 20th anniversary. Next, we have Julius Genachowski. Julius served as chairman from 2009 to 2013. Then we had Tom Wheeler, who served from 2013 to 2017, and Ajit Pai, who served early 2017 to 2021. Gentlemen, thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to serve in this panel. Each of you have your own unique perspectives as chairman, but there's one thing that is consistent among all the issues you had to deal with through your tenure as chairman is public safety in general and 911 specifically. And that is kind of the Switzerland, if you will, of all FCC chairmen. And if you don't mind, give us a little bit of a history, if you will, the past on the 911 and public safety issues during your term as chairman.
Would you like me to start, Brian?
Sure, Dennis, go ahead.
I didn't mean to jump in there, but you noted that that I was earliest in tenure, and my tenure was during the 20th anniversary of 911. So that takes us back a good deal of time. Well, I think this is a great place to open because we ought to just spend a couple of seconds reflecting on how far we've come before we talk about where we are today and where we're going. And the answer is a long, long way. Of course, in the 80s, when I was chairman, 911 was, of course, analog. It was voice-based. It was therefore rife with the potential for not only delay but human error. And importantly, we also didn't have what we're seeing emerge today, which is common protocols that allow for interagency operability. So it was a very, very different environment, and we have come a long, long way.
And Brian, you'll recall, since Dennis set us up with the landline version, yes. You'll recall you and I were working together at CTIA when 911 on wireless devices first became a big issue. And I was thinking today we have a chairman that we should have on here, who's Reed Hunt. Because it was Reed who called me one day when I was CEO of CTIA and said, "You've got to come in." And as all of us know, the immediate response is everybody clicks their heels and says, "Yes, sir, I'll be there." And he played me a tape of a recording. Remember this, Brian? He played me this tape of a woman who was trapped in her car in the Texas night, in a place that she was unfamiliar with, couldn't describe. She was stuck on railroad tracks. This was when cell phones were 25-pound boxes in your trunk. She was stuck on the railroad track, and she called 911 to come rescue her. And then all of a sudden, you hear this train whistle. And there is a train barreling down on her, and the 911 operator is, of course, telling her, "Get out of the car." But Reed turns to me and says, "We are going to solve this, aren't we?" Yes, Mr. Chairman, because how do you have location capability with this wondrous new product called mobile communications? And that began the whole process that has led us to today and rapid SOS. But it's I will never forget that experience. And then listening as the train crashed into the car.
Hey, I'll add something to Dennis and Tom have it exactly right. I think I'll just add, first of all, Brian, hi. and thank you for everything you've done over the years for public safety. The arc of incorporating technology into 911 embracing technology is something we've all lived through, from wired to wireless, from narrowband to broadband. When I was chair, we had the good fortune to put together the National Broadband Plan, and it was a pretty important moment in thinking about what 911 could look like in the future as it continued to embrace technology, including broadband, software, data, the kinds of things that RapidSOS has really been leading on. It's great to see what RapidSOS has been doing, and the evolution of the industry and embracing technology. It helps everyone. It's necessary. There's always a lag between technology that's developed in the private sector and what government embraces. I think all of us in our jobs, this is across parties, have tried to do what we could to accelerate the embrace of technology by 911, the funding that's needed for that, the change in thinking and operations. We've made a ton of progress, but there's still a lot more to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with all that, but one thing I would note, is that coterminous with the introduction of wireless, which Tom mentioned, of course, was digitizing the bit stream, digitizing these channels of communication. And of course, that is what has created this opportunity, which we are now exploiting, the industry is exploiting with some good leadership from RapidSOS, to deliver rich data to the professionals in the field. And that's a digital phenomenon. It was the movement from analog to digital, which, as I say, was coterminous with movement to mobility, that has created this potential for a revolution. And that's one of the points I wanted to make, is that it's important in this industry, which changes so fast, to take a moment and reflect upon the fact that we are in the middle of a revolution right now, an absolute revolution in the potential for improving the efficacy of emergency response. And where it goes is going to be led by the people that are listening to this discussion right now, and not so much by the feds.
So you're so right, Dennis. How, and one of the frustrations when I was chairman was that the Uber driver or the pizza delivery person got better location information than the person operating the PSAP. And how did we get around that? But I want to tell you a quick update and an example of what you're talking about when you talk about the power of digital. I was at a PSAP in New Jersey a short while ago. And, the kinds of people who are sitting in the audience, the wonderful public servants that are sitting there, are the only people that taxpayers like to see sitting around and doing nothing, right? Because that means there's nothing bad going on. But I was standing with a group standing behind a group of folks who were answering calls, and all of a sudden on one of the screens popped up the name, the address, the picture of the location, and the health information of the individual who had just called. And then the phone rang. And so the kind of information that was coming through via RapidSOS was faster than the telephone call, more precise than the telephone call, including the fact that this person on an iPhone had filled out that medical information, and they knew everything that the paramedics needed to know about this person before they dispatched. And you sit there and you go, it has come a long, long way.
It has. Ajit, you were skipped over there for a moment in terms of your tenure as chairman and the perspective you had on 911 when you served.
Thanks, Brian. And I really appreciate you hosting this conversation, and of course, RapidSOS for making this possible. It's great to appear alongside my distinguished predecessors, Dennis Julius and Tom. And as the most junior member, I guess it's appropriate that I speak last. But I certainly think that each of them has described well the layout of the public safety communications landscape over the last 50 years. And I viewed it as my role when I was in office to build upon the great work that they did, bipartisan work. I think this crosses party lines. And for my part, it involved everything from managing that transition from legacy to next-gen 911, building on some of the technologies that, as Tom mentioned, people take for granted in their typical consumer experience, ordering a pizza or getting an Uber. And so for us, for example, one of the things that we pushed was for greater location accuracy vertically, Z-axis, so that when a firefighter is going to a building, they can immediately discern within 3 meters which floor the call is coming from and things like that. And we even built on the tremendous asset that I don't think a lot of Americans fully appreciate, that just the number 911, the fact that it's so simple. I mean, even today, if you go to a country like India, for example, they have different emergency numbers for different types of emergencies. And the fact that we have a single number that is embedded in the American consciousness is a huge asset. And so one of the other things we did at the FCC when I was there was to build on that by creating a 3-digit number for suicide prevention and mental health, 988. And because it has such a nice echo of 911, we hoped that it would become similarly embedded. So I think that sort of the culture of 911 has grown just as much as the technology. And going forward, I'm really excited to see what all the companies like RapidSS and others can do to assist public safety communicators. The other thing I will make a pitch for, though, that hasn't quite been solved is, in addition to funding, making sure that public safety communicators get the recognition they deserve in terms of the standard occupational classification, which I know is something that Brian and you and others have pushed for. These are not, I think they were classified during my time as administrative support. If you've spent time in PSAPs, and I know all of my predecessors have, I mean, you know that these folks are heroic. I mean, they work under sometimes very difficult circumstances, and they are literally sometimes the difference between life and death. And so I think it's time that America recognizes them for the great work that they do. And you never want to have to make that call, but if you do, it's good to know that there are dispatchers on the other side of that call who can handle it very, very appropriately.
Thank you. Just for those in the audience, NENA has certainly been involved in the reclassification of 911 professionals, both in the last Congress and in this Congress. They will hopefully be introduced soon in the House and also in the Senate, legislation that will do the reclassification. But with every legislation, it takes a lot of effort to get it to the president's desk, but we hold out hope this year, and I think we've got our coalitions lined up to help us in that task. So thank you for raising that.
Well, that's also the story of NG 911, isn't it, Brian? I mean, that we're still sitting here waiting for support for the incredibly important costs associated with upgrading NG 911. When I was chairman, regardless of the topic of whatever hearing I was before in Congress, I always included a line or several paragraphs in my remarks saying Congress needs to fund next generation 911. And the fact that we're still waiting for Congress to do that doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all, Tom. I hate to say I agree with you, but I agree with you here. And Brian said it at the opening. What's interesting is that the chairman that you have before you, Brian, certainly have our disagreements on a certain number of issues. 911 is not one of them. It is truly the Switzerland of communications policy, number one. And number two, to echo what Tom just said, the mantra, the lodestar of the FCC, as most know, is the public interest. One cannot think of an arena of public policy more vested with public interest import than 911 and moving this entire country to NG 911. It needs to be funded. It needs to be focused upon, especially in the present circumstances that we as a nation are looking at. I can't think of anything more important than moving ourselves across the board in that direction. It is truly the Switzerland.
especially now, if I might add just quickly, given that with respect to the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, BEAD, we're looking to get billions of dollars out there to fund residential broadband, which is extremely important, obviously. But I would hope that going along with that, there'd be a similar amount of attention devoted to making sure that NG911, as Tom and Dennis said, gets fully funded and gets deployed as well. It would be a shame if we had state-of-the-art residential fiber networks across this country, but we didn't have our PSAPs equipped with the best possible communications framework to handle 911 calls.
I agree.
Brian, I see the possibility here for a bipartisan FCC coalition of ex-chair going to the Congress and pounding on the desk and getting some attention to this. And I'm only being half facetious. We may or may not be the most effective agent, but people have to raise the visibility of this issue. It is time. We have the capability. We have the technical capability. It needs to be funded, and we need to be focused on this issue.
So if I'm in the audience, I'm hearing that perhaps these 4 chairmen and other chairmen may sign a joint letter and also pay visits to the Hill with respect to the need for funding for next generation 911. Did I hear that correctly among the panelists?
Certainly for me. Sign me up.
And
Certainly, if we could make a difference, which I think hopefully we could, it's a visibility issue.
It is a visibility issue, and I thank you for that. I know, and currently in the House, we got it out of the House Commerce Committee on a unanimous vote, but the House has been tied up with a few issues of late, and hopefully we just had a conversation with the new Speaker's office earlier this week, and the goal is to get this out of the committee fully to the floor and voted out for funding for next generation 911. And then it becomes a Senate issue as well. And obviously there's work on the Senate side being done on that front. So thank you very much for that. That will add to yet another coalition that we have lined up to get going when this actually gets voted to the point of getting it out of the House and hopefully out of the Senate and getting everything, as Tom would say, getting everything in order. Tom, I think it was during your tenure at CTIA that the minutes of use in wireless switched from voice to data. And I think that's very important. And we've seen earlier in Ready23, particularly when we're talking about video and how this can, certainly augment and benefit the 911 community and the response community to these emergencies. It's going to take a lot of data. And next generation 911 from the core side of the 911 services will enable the use of data. So how do we position the need to have that, what I call information-rich 911 call, understood and recognized by leaders at the federal, state, and local levels?
Yeah, well, Brian, I mean, you raise a really good point. The capital asset of a 21st century is data. Okay, we're all running around with our hair on fire right now talking about AI. Okay, AI is just the next iteration of data. And I think what we need to be doing is we need to be asking the question, why is it that we're dealing with the potential, some would say imaginary, apocalyptic threats of AI, but we are not dealing with today's personal apocalypse that happens when you don't have an NG911 system, when you don't have a fully data-based system capable of saving the lives of Americans? I mean, I think it's a legitimate question to ask and to say, we've skipped over this important application of data while we've raced off to wring our hands about the next application of data.
Well, that's exactly.
Tom, I think you're hitting on an important point. And Brian, to your question, like, what should we do? I think having us, talk to folks on the Hill is a good idea. It's a fine idea. What really opened my eyes when I was at the FCC was going to a PSAP and sitting with the dispatchers and just seeing what they do and how challenging and important a job it is, and the level of intelligence, empathy, judgment that's required, the complexity of it. I remember just visually seeing the different screens they were dealing with when I was there. We all know from our personal experiences that they can have a really simple user interface that incorporates lots of data with software overlays that enhances their ability to do the job that they already do so well. But I just don't know how if you go visit a PSAP and sit with the people, see the calls coming in, it doesn't have to be a crisis, although certainly if you happen to go to a PSAP during a crisis, you'll be changed forever. But let's get members of Congress to go visit PSAPs in their districts, and they'll have to do the right thing.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
launched a campaign at NENA to do just that.
I think Julius's idea is a good one. It will be difficult, as we all know, having dealt with the Congress, to get lots of members out in the field. I'm all for it if we can do it, because that's where it really makes an impact. But I think the other thing that we can do is to talk about this issue less in terms of rich data and AI and the sort of wonky language that we sometimes fall into, and give them real live examples of what rich data means. It means that you can locate the woman who's in the trunk of a car that who has been abducted, and you can not only know that she's in trouble, you know exactly where she is, and you know everything you need to know about her. That's rich data. And I think if we pound on those examples, which everyone in the audience has many, many, many examples of, that should begin to bring it home and get some movement.
Great. No question about it. And the nice thing is we have had members of Congress, we do these tours, if you will, of 911 centers, the DC and the Fairfax County centers. But having members of Congress in their home districts going to the centers and visiting with them helps them gain a better understanding. And to your point, Dennis, we can speak the regulatory policy speak, all the acronyms and all of the buzzwords, but it really needs to be translated into what this means for the consumer. All of us, we got involved in 911 simply because it was an individual's moment of need, clearly. And in today's world, it's more than just that individual. The see something, say something motto for any type of suspicious activity typically ends up in a 911 call. And the ability to utilize data and information associated with those types of community security related issues, I think is vitally important and should be of interest to leaders of all levels of government, in addition to their own constituents' safety and security and health. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I would say, to Julius's point, those are the visits that truly stick with me, at least. I'm sure all of the folks on this panel have been to a number of PSAPs, but visiting the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in South Dakota and hearing a story about a woman who was found dead in her home, clutching her cell phone because she was dialing 911, but there wasn't wireless coverage. Or visiting Clendenin, West Virginia, where I could literally see on the floor of the PSAP just the muddy water rising, because literally as it was coming in, these two women were taking calls. Or after Hurricane Maria going to Puerto Rico. These are heroic stories. And there are many ways to do the job that we had at the FCC. You can certainly do it from DC on a laptop and look at your spreadsheets, but you're getting out there and really appreciating firsthand what it is the public safety communication system requires and does. It's just eye-opening. I dare say if it is for folks like us, then members of Congress, just general members of the public, I think it would really raise a level of national consensus that this should be not just a priority, but the priority when it comes to communications.
And Ajit, I think you raise a good point, and we also need to make sure that the people who are in the audience here. Again, everybody has said, God bless. We also need to take our hats off to the team at Rapid SOS and the job that they have done We've kind of papered over the fact here that there were some serious disputes in various chairmanships about just how the federal policy should be enforced insofar as location accuracy. And, Rapid SOS made that dispute irrelevant because of the dedication of Michael Martin and his team to deliver this kind of a product that solves problems that we couldn't solve politically. And so we all need to have a collective tip of the hat to Rapid and the fabulous job that they've done.
100%. In fact, I think it was one of the first times I learned about Rapid SOS was a meeting at the New Orleans PSAP, and they showed me what they were doing, leveraging Rapid SOS. My eyes just went, wow, this solves the problem, Tom, that you're just talking about, that we've been wrangling over in Washington. Like, there's been private ingenuity has solved a problem that had knotted us for far too long.
Right. And I couldn't agree more. And it was not just a technical fix. I mean, Rapid SOS also went out into the field and got this dialogue going, doing the sort of the blocking and tackling that it really required to take a very fragmented industry to one that is beginning to move in a common direction, which in this particular sphere is critical.
Yeah, the old line, Dennis, to have great poets, there must be great audiences. Okay, so yes, the Rapid team were great poets. They were writing great poetry, but there had to be a great audience out there in the public safety community who embraced this idea from this young company and said, we can use it to save lives.
Right.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we're kind of running up against the clock here. I would just like to add my thanks too to Rapid SOS for this Ready 2023. In the introduction comments by Michael and Kara Marquez, I thought set the stage perfectly for not only this session, but all of the sessions that are taking place during this virtual event. I know Michael for a long time. We've had a very good working relationship going back almost from day one. And so I definitely appreciate everything to do. I appreciate all of what you do and have done as leaders in the community, in this case, former chairman of the FCC. There is, whether you like it or not, and I assume you do like it, there is a certain prestige that comes with your thoughts, your comments, your thinking. And so you too have the opportunity to serve as a bully pulpit, as a advocate for something that will, in this case, as we look at 911 and next generation 911, benefit the public. I think there may be a message here. Let's see. Okay, I was just checking to see if there were any questions for the panel. You guys lucked out. There are no pressing questions, although I'd love to ask you a bunch of questions.
I was gonna say, if only congressional hearings had been like this when we were in office. Huh?
Hey, Brian, do I get to explain one thing though, that it is my technical incompetence that doesn't have a pretty blue screen behind me, and instead has back of my office here at Brookings.
I mean, your upcoming book or your book?
I can't look as great as everybody else on the screen here.
Oh, you look pretty good, Tom.
Yeah, I got to say, for those in the audience, these are people I would want as friends. And Dennis, I think you should invite these gentlemen and others, myself included, just to sit down around the campfire and just talk about telecommunication issues.
What absolutely open invitation. I would love to host my colleagues here, you Brian, and Michael and some of his top team. And in fact, I've talked to Michael about this out at the ranch for a skull session. And what we'll do is we'll plan our assault on Washington. We need money for NG 911, and we need cognizance of not only the severity of the issue, but the fact that we have the solution in our hands. We just need to act.
Great. Well, hopefully we will all take Dennis up in that open invitation and get this organized. I'll help you organize that, Dennis.
Okay.
I want to thank all of you for being on this panel. I want to thank certainly Rapid SOS for allowing me to moderate this. For me, it was absolutely just a personal joy to see some of you I haven't seen in a while, and to interact and just engage in something that we all have in common, and that is the need to advance our nation's 911 systems. So thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Brian, and good to see you all.
Good to
Thanks,
see you, everyone.
Brian.
Good to see you. Cheers.